Hi everyone, it's John here, and this week we are doing the isolation of copper from Copper Ore Lab. So I'm just going to start right off here on procedure week 1, and this will be the week of February 15th to start. So our third week of lab and our first week in the lab face-to-face. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to use a plastic weighing boat. We're going to weigh out about 5 grams of copper ore into our boat. So the goal here, we're going to isolate metallic copper from this ore, which is a mix of some coppers that you would find in ore that you would mine naturally. So first thing, we're going to weigh out on the open pan balance about 5 grams of your copper ore. As you can see here, I have 2 decimal places, and that is appropriate for our top loading balance. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to transfer our 5 grams of copper ore into an Erlenmeyer flask. So move this down so you can see. So what I'll be doing is transferring this into an Erlenmeyer. I'm going to use a funnel. Just physically transfer the ore. Now you'll notice in my boat I have some residual, so what we'll do now is add this to my plastic boat, and you'll be able to rinse this nicely. So we'll have this suspended in about 25 milliliters of distilled water. And as you can see, I still have some of it stuck in the bottom there when it plopped in. So I'm going to swirl this around so I get a really nice suspension. We want a homogeneous solution. So everything will be able to react nicely. So expose all that ore and all that copper lingering in there. All right, so now that we have that, we're going to move. All right, so I've created my suspension of my 5 grams of copper ore. You'll note the technique video for preparing a Buchner funnel setup. So you're going to make note of that. That's also just recalling what we've done first semester lab. So what I'm going to do here is take my suspension, and a little pro tip, it's not written in the manual, but you can rinse down your copper ore that sticks to the side, so we can allow this solution to react completely, or the suspension rather. So step 2, we prepared our vacuum filtration because we're going to have to filter this while it's hot after these next 2 steps. So this is step 3 and step 4, which is going to be done under the hood. So I'm actually going to turn on my hot plate a little bit. These will be on for you when we get going. And they'll actually help drive the reaction a little bit faster. So, next step, I'm going to be adding my concentrated nitric acid first. And your manual, it says 12 to 15 milliliters. So we'll do that now. I have a transfer beaker for the nitric that I will transfer into this guy. And I'll put about 15 mils in to do that. Again, we're using the transfer beaker, so we're keeping things tidy and neat when performing the reaction. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in now to the reaction itself so you guys can see what goes on. So it says, chew under the hood, slowly add this in 5 milliliter portions. And you'll notice right away that I start to get bubbling and fizzing upon the addition of the nitric. I'm going to keep doing this slowly in 5 ml portions and this is going to get very hot. So don't handle it at the bottom, hand it towards the neck of the flask. So basically what this is doing is dissolving all of this copper ore and any of the contents, and we're getting them into solution. So I got some bubbling going on right now. It's definitely warmed up a bit. So give that a nice swirl and make sure that it all gets dissolved. There we go. For our next step, this is step 4, we're going to add 35 to 40 milliliters of concentrated ammonium hydroxide. Pour it in my transfer beaker. Transfer about 45 mils. To my grad cylinder, and then I will now add. So you'll notice that we actually have a bluish color to this solution. You'll read in your pre-lab, there's some reasons as to why that blue color is showing. So that's fun. So we're starting to see some changes. I'm going to slowly add our concentrated ammonium hydroxide, or ammonia. Ammonia is normally in gaseous form, pure, but this is the aqueous version of it. So ammonium hydroxide, this is ammonia gas in solution. Again, you can see this blue, there's a dark blue color that's forming here. You can see we're getting effervescing, and this is where it really starts to get warm. Remember, swirl it. We want to get all that in. You can dribble it down the sides, as I did there, so we can do that nice rinsing. Just about added it all. And there we go. So the next step is filter the solution hot. You can really start to see that royal blue color there. Really nice. So I've added all the ammonia in. This is going to be a bit stinky, but the majority of it has been added and reacted now. So hopefully whatever ammonia we're smelling is just our excess. Okay. Again, that blue color you can see. All right, so I'm going to go right over to my vacuum filtration, and I'm going to get that going. All right, awesome. Now we're on to step 7. So this is once the solution is cool, and we'll notice a mass of these deep blue crystals forming in the Erlenmeyer. Okay, so we've allowed this to crystallize. Now what we're going to do is set up our Buchner funnel again, and we're going to do vacuum filtration to collect those, okay? So we're going to be actually removing the solution. the supernatant that they're suspended in, just to collect the massive crystals. So I'm going to connect my apparatus here, line in. Now remember, because we're filtering this guy, we want to make sure that we don't lose those crystals. So I'm going to throw in my filter paper. I'm actually going to move this up close so we can see the process of collecting these. Go. Damp this guy down. Again, we're basically gluing down the sides of the filter paper. All right, and let's start. All right, so what I have here too, and we're going to be washing these with methanol. Okay, so it's good to keep this solution cold because the crystals are more insoluble there. So I'm going to pour this off now, and you'll notice as I start slowly forming, these beautiful royal blue crystals begin to accumulate. There. Now what I'm going to do here, I'm supposed to be doing 2 washings with the methanol. 10 milliliters each. What I'm going to do is add 10 mils to my flask here so I can effectively collect the rest of my crystals. So now I can dump this a little bit faster. Beautiful. Try and get those all in. And as you can see, we have these beautiful royal blue crystals which have formed. Excellent. More in here. I'm just going to mix those all. So we're going to leave the suction for about 5 minutes until the crystals are dry. And then I'll have you rejoin me for scraping these off and getting a mass. Be able to move on to the next. Okay, so I've let this run dry. Again, I'm going to vent by removing my rubber tubing, turning off my aspirator. Okay, so now you see these beautiful royal blue crystals that have formed. Beautiful. And what I'm going to do now is transfer these bad boys to a pre-weighed weighing boat. Okay, so we're going to use a plastic weighing boat because we're actually going to have to redissolve these guys. So I want to get a decent mass, a dry mass, if you will, by transferring it to a weighing boat and then be able to transfer as much as I can because I can rinse this boat. Okay, so I took my mass of my container and now I'm going to transfer what I have here into my weighing boat. So I like to do this by just tipping it. You notice this is a bit staticky, but that's okay. So what I'm going to do is just try to get most of these out, like so. Beautiful. Excellent. This weighing paper, or this filter paper rather, we're going to put in a beaker in the front hood. Our blue solution here, we're going to put in a container up to the hood as well. Those are all labeled. And you're going to want to make sure to rinse all this for our next step, or for our future step. We're going to need to use this again. So we're going to be using our vacuum setup 3 times. So I'm going to weigh this, and we'll move on to the next step, which would be step 9. So I'll be right. All right, so I was just on step 8. I've transferred my crystals. I've recorded the mass, which is my yield. I have the mass of my container, the mass of my copper complex in the container, and then the mass of my copper complex right there. So what we're now going to do is we have step 9. We're going to place our crystals into a clean 250 milliliter beaker. Boom. Of course, let's do this using a funnel. Amazing. And I'm going to go ahead and transfer my crystals in. The boat is nice. Oops, sorry, because you can fold her over and get those in. So now, based on the mass of my crystals, I'm going to use about 10 milliliters of water for each gram we get. So I have about 4 grams. So I can use up to 40 milliliters of water to get this into solution. Okay, so we're going to dissolve these, and what I can do is rinse the weighing boat nicely, and you can collect as much of your solid. And you'll notice that it's starting to dissolve. So when we were rinsing with the methanol earlier, that allowed us to keep it in crystalline form, right? Lift this up a bit to show you. I'm going to rinse this. So you'll be able to transfer all of your sample for then the next step. Excellent. So that was about 10 mils. Rinse my funnel. Awesome. Rinse my sides. That I'd say is about 20 mils. And then I'll add an extra 20. So that I could dissolve the rest. And get another piece of paper here out so that you can see this next step. So now we have a royal blue solution. Rinse these down again. There we go, that's step 9. Now on to step 10, we're going to slowly add 6 to 8 milliliters of 5 molar nitric acid. Upon doing this, we're going to see our solution, which will begin to change color. So this is the step where we're going to see this crest-like color, crest toothpaste. Add the rest of that in. Give that a nice swirl. There we go. So this nice pale turquoise color. And that addition of our acid allows for that to happen. So we're going to let this sit. And we're going to allow for suction filtration. So I'm going to clean my flask, remove my filter paper, and then move on to the next step. All right, so we are now on step 11. So step 10, I added my nitric. My 5 molar nitric, and you'll see here, let me get this level, you'll see that there are 2 layers, and on the bottom I have this gelatinous crust like toothpaste solid. I'm going to tilt this again, and we're going to do a vacuum filtration here, suction filter, okay? So with this gelatinous precipitate, I have my water bottle, which I put on ice. So very cold water. I'm going to wash it with 10 to 15 milliliter portions and collect that nice filtrate. Again, I want to get my filter paper glued down. Beautiful. And we'll begin. You'll see as I pour this on, that beautiful solid is being collected. I'll move down and show you my filtrate. It should be a pale blue to colorless. Okay, so that's my supername, right? So that there is collecting, and this is slowly going to get rinsed down. So what I'm going to do now is rinse my flask with this cold water to collect that copper hydroxide. And get that all in there, nice. So we're going to let that run what I'm going to do, again, is we're going to wind up rinsing this solution 2, maybe 3 times. I think 2 would be enough, so I already did 1 rinse. And then as this level gets lower, I'm just going to keep adding the water to allow this to cool off. So we're going to let this run for a bit, and then we'll come back to the next step. Which is we're going to rinse it with a little bit of acetone. Okay, so we're just pulling off the rest of that cold water that I used to rinse. And we'll actually see this dry up. Awesome, and let me just zip down the color of my Supername. Is that pale light blue. Okay, awesome. So this part is important, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom out so you can see, but I will need to so the next step that we're doing, which will be step 12, right? So we've already collected our copper hydroxide. I've suctioned this off. So in this flask, I just have this aqueous solution of this rinsing here, right? So I'm going to vent this. Okay. Let me turn my suction off for a second. All right. So what I'm going to do, this is the money stuff, right? This is where we're containing copper. It's copper in the form of the hydroxide, right? So I'm going to just put this into a 250 milliliter beaker to let it rest. You don't want it to topple over. It'll be problematic. This solution we're going to take to the rinses. And I want to make sure that this flask is clean and dry. Right? So what I'm going to do is transfer this to the container, which will be in the hood. And I'm going to give my suction flask a good rinse with some water, right? Okay, I'm going to remove a little of this. With some acetone. And all I'm doing here is just running acetone through so I can dry out the extra water in here. So just a little bit. We got this here. All right, so now the suction is off, and this part is really, really important because it's super crucial. We don't want to rip our filter paper when we add our sulfuric. So I'm going to move this over again. Now, mind you, the suction is off. I am going to connect my tubing back on. So the next step what this requires is we're going to add 6 to 10 milliliters of 3 molar sulfuric acid. I've warmed this gently in a small beaker. And what I'm going to do is slowly add this, and what we'll get is our copper hydroxide transforming to our copper sulfate. So it says stir the solid very gently with a glass stirring rod, being careful not to tear the filter paper. So what we're going to do is use a rubber policeman, and I'm going to just start swirling the top of my solution. I'm not even touching it yet. And what you're going to notice is that we're going to go from this light blue crusty color to our blue copper sulfate. So the color will begin to change. We're essentially dissolving the copper hydroxide and transforming it to our copper sulfate. And you'll notice that we'll slowly get some of this dripping through, and that's okay. So naturally, we'll get this pasty copper hydroxide dissolving, and that will yield our dark blue copper sulfate solution. Awesome. So I'm going to let that finish up, and then I'm going to turn on my aspirator to allow the rest of this to fall through. And this is good because we're essentially collecting any other impurities that may have escaped during my other two filtrations. So you can see I have that beautiful blue, that familiar copper sulfate color that we love and adore from last semester. Turn that on. Vent that. Fantastic. So what we're going to do now from this, we're going to disassemble. So you can see everything's fallen through, and I've gotten some impurities that slip through the cracks. Disassemble this, and you'll notice that I have this blue copper sulfate solution. Excellent. We're going to transfer this to a clean 250 or 125 milliliter Erlenmeyer. And we're going to leave these out on the bench so that next week we will have copper sulfate crystals coming out of this as the aqueous solution evaporates, leaving us with some beautiful copper sulfate crystals. So we will pick up next week, starting on page 6 of the lab, where you'll record the appearance of your copper sulfate and carry on to the next part, which is essentially transforming the copper and allowing it to come out of solution using zinc. So really nice, really awesome experiment. I hope you guys enjoyed yourselves. I sure did. And we'll see you next week. Thanks.